I, 23-year-old female, will be attending my brother's wedding this fall, along with the rest of my family. It's a destination wedding, about a 4-hour plane flight from my city. My sister, Laura, 26-year-old female, and her husband, Paul, 27-year-old male, are also attending the wedding. My city is in between their city and the wedding location, so they decided that they would come visit me for a few days before the wedding, and then we would all fly to the wedding together. We were on the phone last weekend making travel plans, and Laura told me that she would book our flights together on the same reservation, and I could just Venmo her the cost of my ticket. I told her that wasn't necessary and I could just book my own ticket, but she insisted that I allow her to do it, so that her, Paul, and I could all sit together. She then laughed and said, "Hope you don't mind the middle seat." I also laughed and asked her why I would be sitting in the middle. Wouldn't her and Paul want to sit next to each other? Laura brushed my question off and said, "Well, we both prefer the aisle and window seats. I guess we'll just have to fight it out when we get there." She said that she would text me before she bought the seats, and then we hung up. Here's the thing. I suspect that the real reason Laura and Paul want to sit on opposite sides of the row, with me in the middle seat, is because of their sizes. Laura has told me in the past that she doesn't like to sit next to Paul on planes because they can't both fit comfortably in their seats. She says that they usually pick separate rows and hope that their seatmates are smaller than they are. I don't know their exact weights, but they are both larger people. Laura is 5'11" and about 275 pounds, while Paul is 5'10" and probably pushing 300 pounds. I'm not tiny, but at 5'10" and about 160 pounds, I am much smaller than they are. I knew that sitting in a middle seat between them for 4+ hours would be a very squished and uncomfortable experience for me, and I didn't want my space to be encroached on. So here's where I'm probably the AH. After we hung up, I went on the airline website myself and booked my own seat, an aisle seat close to the front. I also purposely chose a row that already had its window seat booked, so that Laura and Paul couldn't buy the tickets next to me and pressure me into swapping later on. I texted Laura that I'd decided to buy my own seat since I wanted an aisle, and sent her the confirmation. She was quite upset. She called me and told me that I was being selfish, and that we could have all spent quality time together on the plane if only I didn't care so much about an aisle seat. She then backtracked and said that they would have given me the aisle seat in their row anyways, which I doubt. And even if they had, they still would have encroached on my space. I told her that I just wanted to be comfortable, and she yelled, "Well, so did we," and then hung up. Now for an update. Our mom has since texted me and told me that Laura said that I didn't want to sit next to her on the plane because she's fat. For the record, I never said anything about that to Laura, but I'm not surprised that she inferred it. My mom says that I should have just sucked it up and sat in the middle for my sister's sake, since I already know that flying is uncomfortable for her and Paul. I really feel like an AH, but I also really don't want to have to sit with Laura and Paul, so am I the idiot here? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. You're both adults. You bought your own ticket for your own preferences. End of story. Your mom is not in charge, and neither is your sister. Sounds like your sister came up with the plan and you expressed your discomfort, but she ignored it. So you took it upon yourself to do what was best for you. Her comfort is not dependent on you sitting in the middle. If she wants to be so comfortable, she can book first class or business class, not the jerk. Comment 2. LMAO. Nicely done. I'm a big girl, and I would not have done that to my sibling. I would have asked if they were willing to sit next to me so that I didn't have to squish up against a stranger. I would have been honest about it. I also would have understood if the answer was no. I have had people way bigger than me sit next to me, and it's not fun. Not the jerk. Now for the update. Thanks for all the comments from the last post. So, after the whole plane seat incident, things got even more complicated. Laura and Paul arrived at my place 2 days ago, and the tension was clear from the moment they walked in. Laura barely looked at me, and Paul was unusually quiet. I tried to break the ice by suggesting we go out for dinner, but Laura just shrugged and said she wasn't hungry. Paul mumbled something about being tired from the trip, so we ended up ordering takeout and eating in awkward silence. The next morning, I woke up to find Laura and Paul already up and talking in hushed tones in the kitchen. When I walked in, they abruptly stopped talking, which made me feel even more uncomfortable. I tried to make small talk, asking about their plans for the day, but Laura just gave me one-word answers. I could tell she was still upset about the plane seat situation, but I didn't know how to fix it. Later that day, we went out to do some sightseeing. I thought it might help lighten the mood, but it only made things worse. Laura kept making passive-aggressive comments about how some people only think about themselves and how family should stick together. Paul didn't say much, but he kept giving me these looks that made me feel like I was the worst person in the world. I tried to ignore it and enjoy the day, but it was hard. That evening, things came to a head. We were back at my place, and Laura suddenly announced that she and Paul were going to stay at a hotel for the rest of their visit. I was shocked and asked why, and Laura exploded. She started yelling about how I didn't care about her feelings, how I was selfish for not wanting to sit with them on the plane, and how I always put my own comfort above everyone else's. Paul tried to calm her down, but she was on a roll. She even brought up old grievances from years ago, things I thought we had moved past. I was stunned and didn't know what to say. I tried to apologize, but Laura wasn't having it. She said she didn't want to hear my excuses and that she was done trying to make things work between us. Paul just stood there, looking uncomfortable. They packed their bags and left, and I was left standing in my living room, feeling like the worst sister in the world. The next day, I got a call from our mom. She was furious and demanded to know what had happened. I tried to explain, but she cut me off and said that Laura had already told her everything. She said I was being selfish and that I should have just sucked it up and sat in the middle seat. She said that family is more important than comfort, and that I needed to apologize to Laura and make things right. I felt terrible, but I also felt like I was being unfairly blamed. I didn't want to sit in the middle seat because I knew it would be uncomfortable, but I never meant to hurt Laura's feelings. I tried to explain this to our mom, but she wasn't interested in hearing my side of the story. She said that I needed to fix things before the wedding, or else it would be a disaster. Feeling desperate, I decided to go to the hotel where Laura and Paul were staying to try and talk to them. When I got there, Laura refused to see me. Paul came down to the lobby and told me that Laura needed some space and that it would be best if I left. I tried to plead with him, but he just shook his head and said that Laura was really hurt and needed time to cool off. I left the hotel feeling defeated. I didn't know what to do. I felt like I had made a huge mistake, but I also felt like Laura was overreacting. I spent the rest of the day thinking about our relationship and all the times we had fought in the past. I realized that this wasn't just about the plane seat. There were deeper issues at play, things that had been simmering under the surface for years. Growing up, Laura and I were always close, but there was always a bit of rivalry between us. Laura was the older, more outgoing sister, while I was the quieter, more reserved one. She was always the center of attention, and I often felt overshadowed. I think a part of me resented her for that, and it came out in small ways over the years. I realized that my decision to book my own seat was just the latest in a long line of actions that made Laura feel like I didn't care about her. I also thought about Laura and Paul's relationship. They had always been a bit of an odd couple, but they seemed to make it work. I knew that flying was uncomfortable for them, and I felt guilty for not considering their feelings more. I realized that I had been so focused on my own comfort that I hadn't thought about how my actions would affect them. I decided to write Laura a letter. I poured my heart out, apologizing for my actions and acknowledging the deeper issues in our relationship. I told her that I loved her and that I wanted to make things right. I slipped the letter under the door of their hotel room and hoped for the best. The next day, I got a text from Laura. She said that she had read the letter and that she appreciated my apology. She said that she needed some time to think, but that she was willing to talk. I felt a glimmer of hope and texted back, saying that I was here whenever she was ready. So that's where things stand now. I'm hoping that we can work things out before the wedding, but I know it won't be easy. Thanks for reading. Am I the idiot for refusing to put my boyfriend's name on my house and finding out he's on a dating app? We have been together for about 2 years. Our son is 1 year old. My boyfriend made a comment about working to pay my taxes. For reference, we live in a house that I purchased on my own 4 years ago, long before we even met, and I paid it off fully with my savings. There is no mortgage. An argument ensued because I told him that it felt like a weenie thing to say when he lives here. The taxes yearly equal about $350 a month rent. He said his friend says, and he agrees, that he should have his name on the house because he is currently paying the bills and taxes during the time he has lived here with myself and our son, and if I decided to kick him out, he'd have nothing to show for it. He says I'm a jerk because I disagree, as we are unmarried, and I purchased the house far before we got together and had a child, and it is the one asset I have. For reference, he paid $1,100 rent for a one-bedroom apartment before we got together. My name is not on any of his finances, so all access to our finances goes through him. If he left, I'd have no access to any funds at all. I have offered to work but shown the cost of childcare. It was decided I stay home and take care of our son. I used most of my remaining savings in the first year we were together, paying the bills and groceries, etc., along with many medical bills and out-of-pocket insurance during my pregnancy. I am very often reminded that he is the one working and making money. There are communication issues and trust issues that already exist from situations that have occurred. He told me to post here during the argument. So am I the jerk because I don't think it's the right move to put his name on the house I own at this time? Now for an update. To just add that he asked me to stop reading after just 3 comments and has no interest in hearing more, but I am reading them and I really appreciate it and the advice given. A lot of you are right about what I should be doing to better things on my part. Now for another update. Woo! I can't believe the amount of comments this received. Honestly, I did not expect that. I was just looking for input because when he told me to post it here, he seemed so confident that he was correct, saying that any reasonable man would agree. So this response has been overwhelming. I appreciate all the responses both in support and against because it definitely gives me better insight into things. Now for the final update. I most definitely will be keeping the house solely in my name and taking care to ensure that in the event of my passing it will belong to our son. I will also be working toward ensuring my own financial security. Thank you again, everyone. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Wow. I feel sorry for you on so many levels. The gall of him to feel so entitled to be on the title of your property because he contributes to the household. This is your asset, bought and paid for without him. Then he goes post on Am I the Idiot to prove that he's somehow justified in his reasoning. Only proves that he's manipulative and probably trapped you with the baby. Why hasn't he proposed and committed to you and the child? But yet he wants your house. Girl, not the idiot. Big red flag, though. If anything, he should be figuring out ways to get a property together with you rather than trying to own yours. That's the difference between a boy and a man. Comment 2. Not the idiot. If he wants to nickel and dime it, then do it. You will be fully responsible for your property taxes, and he will pay market rent, whatever half of a comparable house rents for per month like a normal roommate. He could also pay you 50% of the value of the house to get his name on the deed, and you could then evenly split the bills. You could use the huge cash influx to pay your half. I wonder if his tune will change when he realizes how sweet his deal currently is. Eye roll. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for all the support and advice. So here's what's been happening over the past 2 weeks. After deciding to keep the house in my name, things got pretty tense between us. My boyfriend was visibly upset and started acting distant. He would come home late from work and barely talk to me. I tried to bring up the topic a few times, but he would just brush it off or change the subject. It was clear he was still angry about the house situation. One night, I decided to check our joint bank account to see if there were any unusual transactions. To my surprise, I found that a significant amount of money had been withdrawn over the past few days. When I confronted him about it, he got defensive and said he was using the money to pay off some debts. I didn't believe him, but I didn't push it further because I didn't want to escalate the situation. A few days later, I received a call from my sister, who lives in another state. She told me that she had seen my boyfriend on a dating app. I was shocked and didn't know what to think. I confronted him about it, and he denied everything, saying that someone must have stolen his pictures and created a fake profile. I wanted to believe him, but deep down, I knew something was off. The next day, I decided to do some digging on my own. I created a fake profile on the dating app and started searching for him. It didn't take long to find his profile, and I was devastated. He had been actively chatting with other women and even made plans to meet up with some of them. I felt betrayed and heartbroken. I confronted him again, and this time he couldn't deny it. He admitted to using the dating app and said he was just looking for a distraction because he felt unappreciated at home. I was furious and told him that if he felt unappreciated, he should have talked to me instead of going behind my back. He apologized and promised to delete the app and never do it again, but I didn't know if I could trust him anymore. In the midst of all this, I made a mistake that changed everything. I was so focused on my boyfriend's betrayal that I forgot to pay the property taxes on the house. I had always been diligent about paying them on time, but with everything going on, it slipped my mind. A few days later, I received a notice from the county that my property was at risk of being seized if the taxes weren't paid immediately. I panicked and called my boyfriend, hoping he could help me out. He was furious and said that this was exactly why he should have his name on the house. He accused me of being irresponsible and said that if he had been in charge, this never would have happened. I felt terrible and didn't know what to do. I reached out to my parents for help and they agreed to lend me the money to pay the taxes. I was grateful, but I knew this was just a temporary solution. I needed to find a way to secure my financial future and ensure that I wouldn't be in this situation again. In the meantime, the tension between my boyfriend and me continued to grow. He started staying out even later and would barely speak to me when he was home. I felt like I was walking on eggshells, constantly worried about what he might do next. One night, I overheard him talking on the phone with someone. He was discussing plans to move out and find his own place. I felt a mix of relief and sadness. On one hand, I didn't want to be with someone who didn't respect me or our relationship. On the other hand, I was scared of being alone and raising our son by myself. The next day, I decided to have a serious conversation with him. I told him that if he wanted to leave, I wouldn't stop him, but he needed to be honest with me about his intentions. He admitted that he had been looking for apartments and was planning to move out within the next month. He said he still cared about me and our son, but he couldn't stay in a relationship where he felt unappreciated and disrespected. I was heartbroken, but I knew it was for the best. We agreed to co-parent our son and try to maintain a civil relationship for his sake. I started looking for a job and researching childcare options, determined to regain my financial independence. As I was going through this difficult time, I started reflecting on my past relationships and realized that I had a pattern of putting my partner's needs before my own. I had always been the one to make sacrifices and compromise, but it was never enough. I decided that moving forward, I needed to prioritize my own well-being and not let anyone take advantage of me. I also thought about my childhood and how my parents had always emphasized the importance of financial independence. My mom had been a stay-at-home mom for most of my childhood, but she had always made sure to have her own savings and investments. I realized that I needed to follow her example and start building my own financial security. In the end, I felt a sense of closure. I knew that my relationship with my boyfriend was over, but I was determined to move forward and create a better life for myself and my son. I started making plans to go back to school and pursue a career that would allow me to support us both. It was a difficult and emotional journey, but I knew it was the right path for me. Thank you for reading. Am I the idiot for refusing to buy my boyfriend's daughter's expensive OCD snacks and causing her to move out? I have been dating Mark for 2 years now, and he moved in with me 4 months ago, with his 19-year-old daughter, Lindy. Mark and I split the bills down the middle. Lindy doesn't contribute, though she has a full-time job making $16 an hour. I never had any intentions of making her pay anything, but her eating habits are driving me up the wall. She has a food routine for breakfast, lunch, and snacks. I'm told she has obsessive-compulsive disorder, and it's an obsessive-compulsive disorder thing. She has 6 pieces of toast every morning between 6-8 a.m., 2 with peanut butter, 2 with butter, 2 with jelly. By 10 a.m., she makes herself 2 hard-boiled eggs because she's starving. She eats 2 grilled cheese for lunch around 12:30. She then eats again at 2, before leaving for work, where she has 2 packages of ramen noodles. Her snack? She takes spoonfuls of peanut butter straight from the jar several times a day. Dinner she usually eats at work, but when she's home, she eats more than me and Mark combined. When she gets home, she has no less than 2 bowls of cereal, where she fills the milk to the top and then just pours it down the drain after, as in drinks none of the milk and just wastes it. And no, she's not overweight. I'd say she's a healthy weight. maybe 130 pounds, and she's 5'9" inches tall. Now I'm going through an entire loaf of bread a day. A big jar of peanut butter doesn't last more than 3 days. I'm buying a carton of eggs every 2 days. I'm lucky to make a gallon of milk last a day. Mark and I hardly ever eat bread, peanut butter, or eggs. Maybe once a week at most for sandwiches, and eggs is maybe once a month. Despite me and Mark both contributing to food, I'm finding that I'm spending nearly $400 extra a month, just due to her intake on the items listed above. I told Mark I would no longer be buying these items, and either he can or his daughter can. He argued that everything is supposed to be 50-50ths, what we agreed on. So I told him that his daughter would be buying it herself then, because I'm not buying this stuff anymore, and if it continues to be a problem, then she needs to find elsewhere to live, because she literally throws fits if this food isn't stocked in the house. He was pissed. He doesn't think his daughter should have to pay for anything, so she has money saved to move out. Am I the jerk? To add, I think a lot of people are skipping over the part where I told him he either needs to be buying this food for his daughter, or she needs to. That's when he argued that everything was supposed to be 50-50ths, hence he doesn't want to fully contribute to his daughter's eating habits and expects me to continue working out the money. I said if they don't start buying it and it becomes an issue for me, she will need to leave. Because when these items are not stocked in the home and I'm the only one who buys it, she slams doors, she witches at us for not going grocery shopping, etc. It becomes my problem, inside my home, my peaceful place. I have zero tolerance for it anymore. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1, not the idiot. He moved in with his adult daughter. 50-50ths or 1/3? Because she is an extra adult, she is working. If her father wants her to save, he should be footing her bills. They are not your responsibility. Also, I am not an expert, but her routine seems highly unhealthy. Wasting food is also a big no for me. If it was only the amount or what she eats, it would be one thing. But the wasting food makes it a lot worse. Last but not least, if you live with other people, you should know that it's gross to eat directly from the jar, double dip, or drink from the bottle. Comment 2. Not the idiot. Don't buy it and ignore her tantrums. Or better yet, both your boyfriend and your daughter are mooching off of you. I don't know why you would want a 19-year-old working child living with you rent-free. Now, for the update, thanks for all the comments from the last post. So, here's what happened this past week. After our last argument, Mark and I decided to have a sit-down with Lindy to discuss the food situation. We explained to her that her eating habits were causing a significant financial strain, and that she needed to start contributing to the groceries, especially for the items she consumes the most. Lindy didn't take it well. She got defensive and said that her OCD made it impossible for her to change her routine. She even accused us of not understanding her condition, which made me feel a bit guilty, but I knew something had to change. Mark tried to mediate, but it was clear he was siding with Lindy. He suggested that we could all chip in a bit more to cover the extra costs, but I stood my ground. I told them both that I wasn't willing to spend any more money on groceries than I already was. Lindy stormed off to her room, slamming the door behind her. Mark looked at me with a mix of frustration and helplessness. I could tell he was torn between supporting his daughter and maintaining peace in our relationship. The next day, I noticed that the usual groceries were still being consumed at the same rate. Lindy hadn't bought anything herself, and Mark hadn't stepped up either. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I went grocery shopping, but didn't buy any of the items Lindy usually eats. When she discovered this, she threw a fit, just as I had warned. She yelled at me, saying I was being unfair and that I didn't care about her needs. Mark tried to calm her down, but it was no use. The tension in the house was evident. That evening, Mark and I had another heated discussion. He accused me of being unsympathetic and rigid. I told him that I felt like I was being taken advantage of, and that it wasn't fair for me to bear the brunt of Lindy's eating habits. We went back and forth for hours, but neither of us was willing to budge. I could see the strain this was putting on our relationship, but I felt like I had no other choice. The next day, Lindy didn't come out of her room until late afternoon. When she did, she barely spoke to me. She grabbed her things and left for work without saying a word. Mark and I barely spoke either. The silence in the house was deafening. I started to wonder if I had made the right decision, but I knew I couldn't keep going the way things were. A couple of days later, things took a turn for the worse. Lindy came home from work and announced that she was moving out. She said she couldn't live in a place where she felt unwelcome and unsupported. Mark was devastated. He tried to convince her to stay, but she was adamant. She packed her things and left that night. The house felt emptier than ever. Mark was furious with me. He blamed me for driving his daughter away. He said I had no idea what it was like to live with OCD and that I had been too harsh. I tried to explain that I was just trying to find a fair solution, but he wouldn't listen. He told me that he needed some time to think and left to stay with a friend for a few days. With both Mark and Lindy gone, I had a lot of time to reflect on everything that had happened. I started to question whether I had handled things the right way. Maybe I could have been more understanding of Lindy's condition. Maybe I should have been more willing to compromise. But at the same time, I felt like I had been pushed to my limit and that I had to stand up for myself. Mark returned a few days later, but things were different between us. There was a distance that hadn't been there before. We tried to talk things out, but it was clear that the damage had been done. He told me that he was going to help Lindy find a place of her own and that he would be spending more time with her to make sure she was okay. I understood, but it still hurt. As for Lindy, she found a small apartment not too far from where we live. Mark helped her move in and get settled. He spends a lot of time there now, and I can't help but feel like I've lost a part of him. Our relationship is strained, and I don't know if things will ever go back to the way they were. Looking back, I realized that there were deeper issues at play. Mark's protective nature towards Lindy and my need for fairness and boundaries clashed in a way that neither of us anticipated. Lindy's OCD was a significant factor, but it was also about how we communicated and supported each other as a family. I wish I had understood that sooner. Thanks for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day!